Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Bible study and episode review in Shady Oak Ministries. I am, of course, Shady Oak, and today we'll be going over episode 14 of season 2 of the TV show My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic, the episode The Last Roundup. Should probably be doing stock cut and paste for these intros, but we'll just keep making it impersonal. Just make sure you're paying attention. But with that in mind also, I'd like to just get more further to the point in that this episode's message was clear as any other before it, but it also included a very fun detail which I think is going to resonate hopefully as much with your hearts as it did to mine in preparing for this study. If you can turn with me in your Bibles to one or another verse in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14, verse 11, or chapter 18 and verse 14. Both verses are identical in that Jesus says this: "Whoever humbles himself will be exalted, but whoever exalts himself will be humbled." And basically, it's just saying a balancing act of your ego. If you're going to try and build yourself up, you're going to find you're just tearing yourself down. If you are willing to lay yourself out, you find you're building yourself up more. And we've talked about this in the issue of pride as kind of, well, as Levi Lesko put it, as a backfiring spiritual occasion, that it's always going to do the opposite of what we set ourselves out to do. And in Luke chapter 14, we hear a parable, a story meant to illustrate this point about how people wanted to get more prominent places at the dinner table, look as important as possible in social gatherings. And the person who came in first wanted the most prominent seat. He wanted to be thought of highest, which was a common thing in those days, and it's kind of is now too. We want to put our best foot forward. We want to appear as the most important. But if we go out for first place, we'll find that, well, who invited those guys who are suddenly better than me? Did the universe shift itself to create this scenario where I can't be the best? Kind of. Because Jesus made the point in saying, you seek and assume the best place in the house, you're going to find there's going to be more important people than you walking in. But if you're willing to accept the lowest place, you'll find people will come alongside you and say, no, I want you to sit here with me. And you'll be brought up to a better place than you thought you were. So with that heart in mind, we also see in Luke 18, and that story about the tax collector and the Pharisee, two people who went up to pray in God's temple, and both very bipolar opposites of the spiritual social club, if you get my drift. One was a Pharisee, a guy who was known literally by his name. Pharisee means the separated ones. He was of a unique club. He was like, at the Brony Con, these would be the staff members. They'd be set apart and have a specific role in the way that we'd interact with people in society. These people committed the entire Old Testament to memory. That includes the genealogies of who begot who in Numbers chapters 1 through 10. It's just a nightmare. And then likewise, these guys had not only committed to memory the Old Testament, the Bible at that time, but they had also memorized all of the commentaries and what was the common consensus view about what each of the commandments were implying. And I mean, it got really silly. Like the way that you were supposed to honor the Sabbath in that you couldn't work. So you could only spit on dirt and not asphalt, because if you spit on asphalt, it would actually mix into the mire and then it would be creating clay. That's work. So you're violating the Sabbath. And Jesus kind of called them on it and said, look, the Sabbath was meant for your benefit, not to make it harder to have a day off than it is to just go to work. I want you guys to have a vacation. We enjoy Saturdays, and it's for that very purpose. And God meant us to be able to take leisure time, but they got their greasy hands on it, and religion ruins everything again, where a relationship would have established itself and what was originally intended. But that likewise, this Pharisee, having pre-assumed himself to be in a natural right standing with God, a righteous relationship, walks up to God's temple and prays thus with himself. The passage says, Lord, I thank you that I'm not like other men, not even as this tax collector here. He's being really loud and boisterous about it. And he's just making a big scene But note, he wasn't praying to anyone but himself. He addressed God, but he was only talking to himself. That's kind of a reflection of the inside heart, don't you think? But just as much as this in mind, remember that with this Pharisee praying thus to himself, he's also citing off the things that made him so valuable to God. You're lucky to have me. I tithe twice a week. I tithe even of my spice garden, my cumin. I give 10 little flakes, and then one goes apart for you, and 10 flakes, one goes apart for you. As if God cares about the outward action. He's looking at the heart, and this guy, though the outside was great, everyone was admiring him. Oh, how spiritual this guy looks. And then we got the tax collector who wouldn't even walk into the temple. He couldn't even bring himself to go into church. Firstly, because a tax collector in Jewish society was basically looked at as a traitor and a brigand to the Roman Empire. Because, well, when Rome was under occupation or when Jerusalem was under occupation by Rome, no occupation of Rome since 700 AD, but you get the idea, they would basically assign people certain roles and tasks, and it was a hot ticket item because if you were charged with collecting all of the taxes that the Roman Empire demanded of the people, you could then write your own ticket of the handling fee, and that would be your paycheck. So basically these people made their entire living off of being dishonest about the way that they lived their lives. Rome would turn the blind eye, but you could guarantee the Jewish people who were paying this to a foreign captor when they are God set-aside people and very proud of that fact, it's not setting aside well for social situations. It's definitely taking the lower road in life and basically saying everything that I do in my life is blood money. And he came before God knowing who he was. And he wouldn't even, it says, look to the sky. He wouldn't even make his eyes towards heaven. He just beat his breast knowing it's all me and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And Jesus said the tax collector went away justified because one of them cared about restoring a relationship, knowing that he didn't have it. The first guy came assuming he had one and proved himself to have even less than that tax collector. Because they both came before God broken, but one of them made the assumption that he was already the winner. And guess who went home the loser? With that in mind, I'd like to take a look at this episode with you guys, and hopefully you guys will see some parallels if you haven't already. In this episode, Applejack was being called to her natural environment, the Canterlot Rodeo. An international meeting of all the different ponies and all the rodeo champions and champions that would ever be competing with Calamity Mane and all of the hot ticket items that would be drawing in horses from all around. And since it's a pony-related society, I'd assume it's a well-attended event. And because of Applejack's history, praise was lauded onto her of saying, oh, you're going to bring home all those blue ribbons. It's without even a doubt. We can assume that. Now, bells may be going off, but you would say the argument in saying, well, yeah, but Shady, didn't Applejack just kind of blush at the prospect and the idea? Didn't she just kind of modestly and graciously accept a compliment? Is there anything wrong with that? No, but here's the thing. Applejack went along with even expectations of herself. And you can even abuse a compliment and allowing it to corrupt you, because guess what the mayor was doing? She had such high expectations of Applejack that she brought up the idea, hey, maybe with all that prize money, would you like to help contribute? And Applejack generously offered something that she assumed to have. Now note, generosity wasn't the issue, it was the heart behind it that she assumed she had something that she didn't have yet. And guess what? That's pride. Now note, I'm not hating on Applejack, Applejack's best pony, but note this in saying that we can admire Applejack as the most effective character in illustrating a biblical point, let alone something that we can actually apply to our lives in the clearest and most honest way possible, like the Bible always does. We can recognize that her integrity showed warts and all. That even her flaws were something that we can learn from, exactly like King David. Exactly like in this case, where Jesus, who knew the hearts and thoughts of people that he interacted with, he didn't commit himself to them, but he could definitely use them for their effective illustration, because there were no phonies when your eyes are like a flame of fire. So note that when Applejack was making these assumptions and making this self-expectation of even having a party to show her off, she was entering that rodeo, as Pinkie Pie said, with a lot of nervous energy, because her pride had set her up to be so exalted that what's going to be the inevitable result of all of this? Spoiler alert for the episode, she failed. She didn't take home one blue ribbon. And because of this, having to live with the shame, she condemned herself to isolating herself from those that cared the most about her without even an explanation. We would know about this in Proverbs, that he who isolates himself seeks his own desire and rages against all wise judgment. And it's not the best move to go if you're trying to build character, or let alone establish it and set a good image, because everyone was worried sick about her. They didn't get any news, any word that something happened to her. They were going all over Equestria, and Applejack tried to cover her tracks, but eventually, when they found her, dodging questions, avoiding any sort of confrontation, and even going as far as breaking a Pinkie Pie promise. I mean, how could she? And with the compromise of even her integrity to not have to admit a mistake, we saw where she messed up. And it's with this in mind that I want to note these three things as something that we could really ask ourselves as a note as far as where Applejack made a mistake. Because being a perfectionistic personality myself, I tend to be really hard on ourselves and expect a lot of ourselves. And it never really does us any good. And it's something that I'm trying to learn as much through this as I hope that you will be as well. But in the first question, note Applejack's logic in that she saw that if she wasn't useful, she wasn't wanted. Just like in the table. If she didn't have the best image in the table, she sought the best thing. That's not the bad part. But with a heart that assumes that it's already yours, when you lose that, if you only settle for first place and you get second place, then you may as well have gotten last place. This expectation is designed for failure, just as much as like playing the lottery. It's like a tax on stupid people. My father hilariously loves to note that, oh, I can play the lottery, but that only slightly decreases my chances of winning. You get some winners every now and again, but the problem is, where does the money go? It doesn't even last more than a week because these people aren't earning these things. It's just luck of the draw and a very thin margin at that. And even the person who does succeed rarely holds on to it for more than a few months. And even on top of that, loses most of the relationships they have because suddenly they have all of this unearned and undeserved money thrown on them. Because they only invested, $15 to get back $15 million? That's not deserved. But with these lines and odds drawn so thin, we think, oh, suddenly I have this value. I can contribute to people. And it goes just as quickly as it came. Because that also brings the point, the second question. Applejack saw the expectations of others worth more than even her own integrity. Through lying, element of honesty, sacrificing even that so she wouldn't have to face shame. And note, shame is going to be a natural feeling when we have to own up to, for any person trying to show integrity. Applejack, being the element of honesty, shows the worst part of herself just alongside the best, and you appreciate that about her because you don't get a phony. You can just basically get to know the person based off of the cover. And by taking in this darkness, you could tell that this wisdom was not from above, like James 2 said. Is that it's first pure, then peaceable. That it's first seeking peace at the sacrifice of purity. That's sensual. That's demonic. And that's something that we really need to note, because we want to have these images of ourselves that give us our value. But if that is something that has even the slightest of unstable ground, it's going to break eventually. And that's not something that you want to fall apart. Because I can't tell you how sad it is to look at the stats today and see these suicide rates of people who at one time had risen to the highest peak of success, whether it's financial or relational or anything in their causes, and they finally reach the top and realize it wasn't all I was set out to be, and they have nothing left to live for, and end up becoming murderers to their own bodies. That is really something to take away. Because the more we recognize, oh, it's the next time, it's the next greatest seat. If I can get to the front of the table, everything will be all right. But then you find out the person at the end of the table is paying the check for the meal. Eugh. See where I'm going with this? Recognize that if your expectations, if your hope, if your self-worth is put on how other people see you, that's going to be changed based off of, well, basically not only on a daily basis, but on an emotional basis as well. Because if my own self-expectations are based off of how I see myself, I may not always feel the same way as I do at one point to another. And then if I'm basing on someone else that I don't know nearly as well as I do, it's going to be risky, because you can't even tell if someone's lying to you about it just for your feelings' sake. And that's where paranoia sets in. Do you really, I'm building this up and recognizing pride's going to be coming at you from all these different directions. Do you really want to just enter into this battle zone? You want to go around all together? That's the point that's being made. But the third one is very important because it asks us all a question. Applejack's pride made her focus so much on being needed, she forgot what was the only thing that ever mattered. And this is what I want to ask all of you. What would you rather be? Wanted or loved? We've talked about these different types of love before, and agape, and that being perfect and patient and complete. We also know eros, and being desired and wanted and being pursued. And we see that eros definitely has a lot more physical properties on the outside, in saying that we're drawn to somebody. We feel valued because we're being pursued. And just like the poem about the amaranth, it was this mountain flower that wasn't really admired by anybody. It was pretty, it had purple petals, and it was very adamant during nature, so when facing winter, so nature didn't affect it all that much. But the amaranth spent all of its time looking at the rose and saying, "Oh, Rose, how I admire your beauty." And the rose looked at the amaranth and said, "I admire you because people are always tearing after me, and I don't last more than a day. I'm uprooted, separated from my life and torn to pieces, and my petals scatter just as quickly as they blossom. Amaranth, I admire you." And the funniest thing is, the value that God places on us is eternal, and the value that people place on us is just as much like every other celebrity. You can't really tell much as far as who was the last celebrity unless you go and look over the tracks of when they were at their peak. Because the moment they hit bottom, it may as well have been nothing. And it's even more sad when people try to build themselves up because they only have to give more of themselves away. And that's not what God would have for you. And we see this illustrated in My Little Pony, that Applejack wanted to be, sacrificed to be, and even made compromises to be or remain wanted, to be useful, to contribute to Ponyville, to work hard, and that personality and ethic being her whole center and drive for her life. That perfectionistic personality in a self-defeating system is not one we need to follow, but who is the good example in this episode? I want you to listen closely. Derpy. It was an Applejack episode, but what's the most famous part about this entire episode as a whole, especially during its first premiere? Not the garbage that they replaced it with recently, because some people were offended. Derpy had 4 lines, was responsible for a majority of the damage that Applejack was needed to pay for. If anything, she was the antagonist in this episode. And yet, Derpy knows how much we love her. What lasts longer? What really mattered in the end? Who do we still look for in the background? Who could we care less if we even hear from her anymore, if we could just see that adorable blonde hair and those crooked little eyes on our favorite gray Pegasus? It's not a matter of what Derpy ever contributed to the show, because she contributes so little. The same thing alongside with Maud Pie. She's only appeared in 1 episode and had 1 line in 1 movie. Derpy had 4 lines in this episode and was anything if not unhelpful to the whole progression of the plot line. But she serves as the example of saying, hey, you don't have to contribute anything as long as you know that people love you. That's all you'll ever need. And note, that's the one thing that God emphasizes more than anything else. If you want to be useful in an eternal sense, good luck. Because we, as human beings, our life is like a vapor. It comes one day, is gone to the next. A wave tossed in the ocean. It's here and then it's gone. Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes is the most depressing thing you'll ever hear if you're looking about life under the sun. But if you look at life through the sun, S-U-N instead of S-O-N, you focus on God's Son. You look at what He has done for you. You don't live a self-centered life, but a Savior-centered life. You knew you needed saving. You accepted the fact that you were loved so much that He gave up His life for you. No, but I have to be religious. I have to commit verses to memory. I have to go to accountability group. I have to be in church 3 times, twice on Sunday, Wednesday night, or wherever the schedule is and where I am internationally. I have to martyr myself, I have to give myself up for my faith. I have to do all of these things, because then God will never want me. We use that word love me, but that's the opposite of the truth. Love is not conditional. It's a gift. And a gift simply needs to be received. You want to know how God cares about you? Look at how our fan base looks at Derpy. It's not that she contributes anything to the story or the plot line, but God is simply happy that you exist. That He's always looking for you in that little half a second of the background, even if she skipped out all of season 3 except to appear under one pony's leg and give us that little wink at the end of the season. That's all that God cares about, because He loves you. And that's the most important thing to remember. It's not about what you contribute. It's who you have been called. Your worth isn't determined by what you contribute. It's how someone sees you, how someone places value on you, not the value that you make for yourself. Thank you for your time and listening to this study. I hope it's been a blessing to you. And if you have any questions or would like to know more, get additional verses or insights into this study, I'd be more than happy to answer them in the comments below. But even more importantly than that, even in supporting this ministry, if you want to help the gospel go out to our fan base, if there's someone who you feel could be blessed by this and didn't know these things and may be helpful, and these illustrations may be helpful in helping them understand more about how God cares about them through the venue of My Little Pony, please share this video with those who you feel would be blessed by it. And more than anything else, thank you for your time, and God bless you.